Waconia County Planning Commission this Monday, June the 18th, 2018 at 6 p.m. Our first order of business is invocation by our county chairman.
Yes, sir.
Captain.
Pray with me if you'd like. Father, thank you that we are alive, and help us to appreciate right now that it is only by your strength, your power, your wisdom that we are upheld, that we are able to live, move, have our being, communicate, and that we're really dependent on you to be held together in all capacities. So we're thankful for that. We rely on that. For this meeting tonight, we lean into your wisdom. We ask for your guidance, prudence, for discretion, for mindfulness in the words we speak, and real quickness to listen carefully to others so that we can come to help from the staff's part and bring help and come to decisions for the commission's part that are for the good of this county. In your name I pray. Amen.
Ms. Williams, do the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we have the minutes before you. I need a motion to approve the minutes for June 4th.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections or? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I think I just saw Mr. Gramling walk. There he is.
Do we need to take another vote for the minutes? Or
No, sir, they're good. You're good.
Okay. All right, we're going into the public comment, non-agenda items. We don't have anybody signed up, so we'll move right along to staff update.
All right, regarding minor subdivisions, I've had several more phone calls over the last couple of weeks, people asking about our standards for them, and I just, I keep to what we have now. But it's still an ongoing issue, and it's just seems to me to be increasing. Now, maybe I'm just very aware of it, but it's still something that's constantly on my radar, so I'm keeping it on yours. Thank you. That's all I got.
Okay. Now we have, item number 7 is for public hearing on regard to lot improvements. So I'd like to open this public hearing now. Adam?
All right, so this language is language that you voted on about a little more than a month ago, say 6 weeks ago. And it came to my attention after the fact that we couldn't just do it as a normal hearing or a normal vote and send it to council. We had to do a public hearing. That entailed us advertising, or me advertising it in the newspaper. So this is language that you all have already voted on and liked. I think one or two of you may not have been here when we voted on it, but what this did was it took the county currently has 0.57 acres as the minimum lot size. So if you want to make something smaller than that, you can't technically. That's based upon an old DHEC standard, which didn't really exist. The DHEC standard was for 0.57 acres was 25,000 square feet or so. That was for septic, and that was just kind of anecdotal. So what was voted upon last time with Planning Commission was to remove that 0.57 and just be based upon the underlying zoning district. And the only other item that was added was a whole big blurb at the bottom, that big yellow paragraph there. And that's for in the zoned areas, the more zoned areas like residential, lake residential, or control-free district, or unbuildable lots. They can stamp it and say, we're not going to build on it. And create it. You're looking at me.
Okay, we have one person that wants to speak during the public hearing. Mr. Tom?
Members of the commission, I am Tom Markovich, just in case you're wondering. Specifically, I think that in general, doing the minimum lot size the same as the underlying zoning district is the right way to go. Now, the second blurb, the second yellow part, I have an issue with, and that is I understand that, you know, in certain times, people may acquire, there may be lots that somebody acquires and they need to add it to theirs and they're not necessarily planning on building on it. It's just, you know, they want a bigger lot, so they buy a piece that adjoins it. However, we're saying in this language that we're gonna have this recorded on the deed, and it says depicted is not eligible for connection to sanitary sewer or a septic tank system approval. The county has no say in septic tank approval, period. That's all DHEC. And so I would remove that language in entirety. And there's other places where you might have situations, I mean, we're going back and looking at, we have some awful big minimum lot sizes in the zoning areas that are very large. Why we wouldn't want them to be allowed to connect to sanitary sewer or put in a septic doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't understand what this language, where it's headed. Aside from the fact, like I said, only DHEC can say whether or not you can have a septic tank. The county has, they've really got no dog in that fight, so. That's it, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Open up for discussion now.
Yeah, I've got a question about the blurb at the bottom. Let's see, this is requiring a notation to be put on the deeds. Is this only for new stuff going forward, or is staff gonna get in the map room and start stamping all the deeds?
This, like most of our language, is just going forward. We're not looking backwards there for this. And it's on, I'm sorry, yes, and also it's on a plat, not the deeds. This is just
Yeah.
strictly for the plat, not the deeds.
Well, would this cover existing small lots?
I'm not sure your question, sir.
Well, if it's just now going forward, what about existing small lots that don't work with the offsets?
So,
Does that need to be noted on there?
maybe it's just strictly going forward. So for instance, if you and Mr. Kisker had property next to each other, and let's say you needed some extra room to build a shed or something like that, and you only needed, let's say, 200 square feet in order to meet our setbacks and his setbacks and everything. So you need this little tiny piece of property. In order to transfer it, I couldn't just, no one's just gonna hand me a deed that shows the two finished products. That little piece has to be transferred, that 200 square feet, just for conversation's sake, it has to be transferred. And it has to exist in order for you to sell it. So your surveyor and your lawyer and everyone else that you have to manage to pay to transfer property will create a little 200 square foot parcel for you. And this language would go onto that 200 square foot parcel because it's not, in and of itself, you can't build on it. So this information would go on there to say, hey, we're not pretending to sell this as something you can build on in and of itself until it gets married with your parcel. So now your piece of property, Mr. Kisser's property is 200 square feet smaller, and your new property is 200 square feet larger. And so that's simply for getting these little bits and pieces. We get quarter foot stuff. People need to put docks in and things of that nature, who oftentimes need to marry properties and things like that, and they have to transfer it. And the only way to transfer it is to create it. So it's paperwork, but this language helps out a little bit. So no, this is not going backwards, this is strictly going forwards.
But again, we have no jurisdiction or say-so over what DHEC does, so putting that language in there for the septic tank is above and beyond our authority, because we don't regulate that anyway. Even though it's probably not gonna be big enough to do it on, but the language is there, and somebody will eventually come back and go, wait just a minute, you don't have the authority to do that. And we could, so I personally think that needs to be taken out of it as well. Just strike it completely. The rest of it looks all right, but that particular part, where it says depicts, it'll say on the plat, is or are not eligible for connection with a sanitary sewer, or septic system tank approval. That's not our authority. I mean, we might can tell them they can't build on it because it ain't big enough, but we can't tell them they can't put a septic tank on there, even though legally, I mean, looking at it, you know they can't, but we can't tell them that because it's not our job. That's DHEC's job.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Didn't draft the language, but as I understood it, Mr. Chapman, correct me if I'm wrong, this came from Pickens County, essentially adopted verbatim, and I think the notion, as I understand it, can't speak for them. My only really objection is some clarification on the verbiage, but as far as what the notice is trying to do, it's not stating that this is the county's determination, but it's stating because of the nature of this lot, me, surveyor, me, whoever is having this deed recorded, is putting the public on notice of these criteria. So I understand Mr. Markovich's objection, and I understand what you're saying, and I'm not sure that a better way wouldn't be to have maybe these outlined, and those that apply would be stamped on the plat. But I know the goal is when you have these very small lots, and we're dealing in litigation with one that's 9 square feet, to have some annotation on there for the public, following up that, right, this is a particular kind of lot. The ilk of this lot is one that you're not going to build on, not going to, be able to connect to sewer or a septic tank because it's not buildable. And so it's really just for an intermediate or intermediary transfer like Mr. Chapman described, or for some other purpose, usually to be combined again for a dock or something like that. But that's, again, my understanding of why it's there. Mr. Chapman can probably add more detail.
But just because Pickens says it on there doesn't mean Oconee County has to say it on ours. I mean, if they say we all have to stand up and jump at 3 o'clock in the morning in Pickens, that don't mean we have to do it in Oconee County, and we don't need, I just think it needs to be out of there, because it can cause problems down the road with certain people that love to fuss about everything. This could be one of those items they love to fuss about. And it not being there is not gonna hurt anything.
Yeah, I'm not advocating it for being there or not. I'm trying to explain why I think it is there and where Mr. Chapman got the language from, and I guess it's been operating fine in Pickens, and so that's the only authority I have to rely on as to what the language is there for. So just in an effort to assist you in your decision-making process.
To serve the same purpose like you were talking about, could you have something like a checklist so that it lets people know that this individual property would need to meet these standards, DHEC approval of, and if it won't, it won't, but at least they know they have to ask, even though they're adding it to a property that already may have a septic tank, right?
So,
And then you would also be, and then they would have to say they must meet all requirements for certificate of occupancy, et cetera, be aware of its size or something like that, so that they've got a checklist that simply says, I need to make sure that all of these things still suit what I'm trying to do when I add this piece of property to my other piece of property, so that in the future they don't decide, hey, I didn't like that 9 square feet after all, and now I'm going to sell it to somebody. They need to be aware that those things would have to be looked at before they built a house on it, even though they love that guy they're buying it from. Does that make sense?
It does.
So that you're making a fair warning.
I think that the language just is there to warn the person, basically, that they can't, it's not that we aren't allowing them by law to do it, it's just warning them, DHEC ain't gonna give you a permit because this lot's too small. I don't think there's a problem with the language, because it just is informing them of, and it keeps them from having to go to DHEC and say, okay, I want a permit for this, and then DHEC say, no, the lot's too small. I mean, I don't personally think that there's a problem.
Or
Just
change the word
informing them.
may not.
I was just about to say may not
Instead
meet,
of yes,
and it may be that it
change
may
it
not
to
meet
may not.
setbacks and may not meet a variety of things.
and that's what I was saying, maybe either a may not or a comma as applicable, something to put notice on it. As I understand it,
Yeah.
Mr. Chapman, again, I don't mean to wrestle the microphone from him because he deals with it on a daily basis. I've only had a couple of situations where I'm dealing with this, and one it's just egregious examples that make it in front of me, like the 9 square foot lot, something
But
like that.
if I saw may not on my piece of property, I would certainly go ask before.
In a new subdivision, when a new subdivision is created, do they not now have to get DHEC approval on every lot as opposed to generic one in every 4 or 5?
We have to have a DHEC person here in the room, so I'm just gonna look back to her for a moment, but that's correct. So, yes, that is correct, that is correct.
So a lot that DHEC has denied, this would be a good location for this wordage. And I can actually think of a new subdivision that was done, and they sold it to a consumer and didn't tell them that those lots, that they knew those lots were not approvable.
So the first part, if you back up look at the very first sentence of the yellow. It says creation of lots that prime use can't be built upon due to dimensional setbacks, buffers, easements, and or lot size. So while that's a good principle, if it's a big enough lot in a subdivision, this wouldn't necessarily get stamped on it because a lot would be large enough to build upon, even though it wouldn't be buildable due to the septic tanks. I don't know that.
I guess what I'm saying is if a developer has come out, he's platted a lot, he's gone out to DHEC and gotten approvals on all these lots and says, yeah, but these two, you can't get systems on, then maybe that's where this language would be applicable.
That'd be great under minor subdivision standards, if you wanted to put it there. Just saying, because that's honestly, land development regulations is where that would go. If you want to say lots that can't be built upon because of DHEC regulations need to state that would actually go under our subdivision standards or our LDRs somewhere.
I would still like that under the may or may not, though, as opposed to cannot, because as standards change and as engineering systems improve, it's not to say that we wouldn't want to prohibit something from having the ability to.
So just so I'm clear, that may not, that some of you seem to be talking about, just to check it, is depicted on the slat, may not instead of is are? Is that where
More
you
as a
all?
warning as opposed to, and it's not just septic, it could be setbacks and a variety of things.
So, so just to kind of do it in a line by line fashion. So underlying zoning district lot size, the very top there. Are we all, I'm not asking you all to vote, I'm just trying to kind of go through this line by line so we can get this cleared up. So that seemed to be something you all voted upon and liked. So the first part of the second paragraph, the second yellow blurb, creation of lots that primary uses can't be built upon because of buffers, easements, lot size must be accompanied by the filing language and recorded with register of deeds. Is that that's something that we haven't talked about? It seems like no one's brought it up in the negative, so I'm gonna assume it's in the positive. Is that?
Yeah, I'm happy with the clause. We just need to tune it a little.
Okay, all right. So then if we went lots depicted on this plat, instead of is are, we went to may not,
Be eligible, you'd have to add the word be.
may not be eligible.
Teacher, sorry.
Now sanitary sewer was, some of you are against it, some of you are for it. That's, I guess
fine.
that's where we are.
That would apply, period. Either way, that should stay in there.
That's,
I think it clarifies everything once you change it to precatory.
And it still accomplishes what our goal was, is just to warn them, right?
mm-hmm.
Okay. I think so.
Does DHEC restrict lot size where there's sewer systems? Sewer systems?
We do not deal with sewer systems, we deal with septic tank systems. Big difference there. Septic is usually one house.
Right.
Could be a whole community. As far as lot size, if you could get your house on there,
You don't have to be on top, sorry.
no, sir, as far as the systems themselves, we deal with the septic, not the sewer. Okay. If they can get a house on there, because we go by the bedrooms, okay, whether it's 1 or 15 bedrooms, and the system will fit, even if it's a pump system, then it will go.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
So what we need now is a vote to send this on to council for their approval, as you've got it set up,
Let me
as
just-
amended.
As amended, let me just double check on that, because at the hearing in chapter 32 is different for me, so, one moment. Is there anything special to do for a hearing vote at all?
Well, we've had discussion on it, so really, you're gonna have a motion now to amend. You already passed on this first go, so you're gonna have a motion to amend to add that language, a second on that, any further discussion, if you wanna tweak that amendment some more, then a vote on the amended ordinance, and that's gonna go forward to council. And I'm sorry, I was talking to Mr. Markovich, did you work on that contract, comma, install? Yeah, so maybe we'll go ahead and make that motion to change it to may not be. And go ahead and pass that. There's another issue I wanted to bring up. I don't want to confuse things, so maybe just take a step.
All right, I have a motion to change the wording to may not be.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Do we pass that and then also then discuss this, nor shall we do something?
Yeah, we'll go.
Okay, so we vote for this first.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, now our next one, Mr. Root.
Yeah, it just read kind of awkwardly when I was looking at it today, particularly the contract, comma, install. I couldn't figure out exactly what that was trying to convey. Nor shall any person contract, comma, install upon this tract any building or structure.
I think at that point, we've gone beyond warning somebody, and now we're telling them what they can and can't do. If our intent is to warn them that, hey, you need to be aware of what you're doing here.
So they couldn't even put like just a portable building that they don't intend to put power on or anything with this language here, right?
So if it doesn't fit them a lot because of setbacks, they wouldn't be able to do it, and the point is just to warn them off from being able to do it. The land use laws as it exists preclude them from doing that. The language on there tells them that there's a zoning code or land use laws that stop you from doing this. So this doesn't stop you from doing it, it's the law of the land stops you from doing it. And this is saying, this is just that warning, because this is about things that can't be met regardless of required setbacks or required buffers or things of that nature.
All right, so, again, if you remove the words nor shall before building permits, and it would then read lots blank depicted on this plat may not be eligible for connection to a sanitary sewer or septic system tank approval, comma, building permits, certificates or occupancy, or any other development permit, and then strike, and then put a period after that. And it seems to me that then says what you're asking them. All of those things are subject to approval because of its whatever. You're just warning them that it may not be eligible for any of these things. No building permit, no tank, no septic system, no certificate of occupancy, or anything else. If you just put a period after development permit.
And then until it has been combined.
Well, and then this may be remedied by the combination too. However, you might need to ask, or however you would want to phrase that.
I think if you didn't put the period in and just
Just left it.
struck it, what you're talking about, so read it this way. May not be eligible for connection to a sanitary sewer or septic system tank approval, building permits, certificates of occupancy, or any other development permit.
Nor shall any person contract to install.
Strike, yeah, I think striking that for me, I'm just.
Take that one
clarity.
out.
Yeah, and then in comma, until it has been combined with a tract that creates a conforming tract. So,
It goes straight from development permit until. Everything in between goes, right?
Yeah.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah. Until it has been combined with another tract of land. That's good, yeah,
That work?
works for me.
Be able to edit and put it up there.
Just trying to work my way around what you just wrote, not because I don't believe I was trying to back into it. No, I think that works. I think that should suit the purpose.
I make the motion that we take out from be issued to or structure.
And nor shall.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the be issued right before nor shall. Take out be issued nor shall any person contract install upon this tract any building or structure.
All right.
As well as the nor shall above
Before
for
building permits, right.
That's a grammar term.
Oh, gotcha. Yes.
And I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion?
I'm thinking of one case right now. There is a lot, it does not have septic approval. There is an easement 2 lots up that this lot has approval to go to. It's an easement, it's not a property. Say the guy with the lot says, well, hey, instead of just an easement, I'd like to buy this because I need to move some trees and things like that. It's not connected, it's 3 lots over. So until it's connected, how do you connect it if it's 3 lots over?
Yeah, that exactly. So the surveyor comes in, cuts off that 20 by 300 strip. And let's just say it's not buildable to the setbacks for whatever you do. So at that point, the surveyor and the title company and the lawyer and everyone else will show up to my office with that, your driveway now. That'll get recorded with this on it, can't build on it, and then when you're buying it, because you need to transfer, you need to have something to transfer. And
So it'll
unfortunately,
combine on the D, but it won't necessarily be contiguous space.
it'll be contiguous once they submit the
Still
survey.
wouldn't be contiguous space. You have a lot, you have an easement across 2 lots, and then you have an easement for where the septic system's gonna go. You just wanna buy because you wanna cut down some trees or move a fence or something like that in the easement on that 3rd lot over. And so you're gonna buy that septic field location, but you just have an easement across the other 2 lots that you're not gonna buy. So it's not contiguous space.
Okay, and how big is that easement? Well, if it doesn't meet our minimum lot size, then you wouldn't be able to do it anyways.
You wouldn't be able to do what?
To subdivide it off.
Is it not connected through the easement?
I
I
was
mean, isn't
gonna
that what
say,
an
it
easement
is
is?
connected, an easement does connect it,
An
right?
easement connects it, but it's not your property, it's someone
But it's
else's
not your
property.
property,
It
so it
doesn't,
would
it
be
doesn't,
contiguous.
you don't get taxed on it, it's not a shared, it's not a property line.
You have the right to buy lot 3 over here, or at least a portion of that, surveyed off and bought, rather than just an easement for a septic field. Okay, I've got it. But now if we, as it's written, now he can't put the septic field that's been approved for him to put.
Well, if you meant all required setbacks, and that you can't build upon due to dimensional setbacks, buffers, easements, or lot size, so can you build on it? I mean, like, if it's not big enough
You
to
build on
build,
the main lot.
well, if it's not big enough for him to build on, then he
Build
can-
enough, it's big enough to build on, but the developer that did it, it was not big enough for a septic system, so they gave an easement 2 lots over for the septic.
and is that buildable?
That lot is also buildable.
All right, so then this is not applicable. Then this wouldn't be applicable. This would only be applicable if that wasn't, if it was slivers of lots, pieces of lot. If it's a big enough lot, then it's fine. Now, this is only for those lots in which you cannot build upon.
But the sliver would be the easement, that 10 by 20 or 20 by 40 space for the septic system.
If it's in a zoned area such as, let's say, Lake Residential District, it's gotta be a 1/4 acre minimum size anywhere and it wouldn't get approved.
Okay, so it's not, so he wouldn't be approved for purchase, he would have to keep it as just an easement.
Well, he could try to purchase it, of course, but if it didn't meet our minimum lot size in that zoning district, is it Lake Residential?
It is in Lake Residential.
So minimum lot size is 1/4 acre, so that issue is not,
Okay,
doesn't
so he
speak to
couldn't
this.
buy it, it would always stay just as an easement for,
Unless he could add on to it through his pipeline or somehow.
Gotcha. Okay.
Pencil it
All right, I just wanted to make sure that while I didn't approve of the way that developer had done it, I'd hate to mess that guy up by our wording. No questions.
It seems to me that something like that might be handled as a special,
Exception.
exception. I don't think we need language in the law to accommodate a strange situation.
Unless there's any objection, I'm gonna give Tom about 30 seconds. He's about to jump out.
I like the idea of the special exception. Here's the deal. Once that lot has been deed stamped and it's recorded, there's no way to go back. It's not like you can come back. They don't have an appeal system at the where you register your deeds. There's no way to appeal that and get a special exception. So I don't know how that gets real confusing. Two, I don't know that two lots necessarily have to be contiguous in order to combine them.
Okay, that was really my
There are a
question.
number of lots in this county that are not contiguous, that are in fact, they're the same parcel.
And I know them to be the same parcel. I just didn't know if we were considering them connected.
So that would be a property book, which, as Mr. Markovich stated, there's plenty of in this county. But, yeah, you're talking about two separate parcels, right?
It would be.
If he can combine them and them not be contiguous, then that's perfectly fine, if he can combine them. I just didn't understand the definition of combining them. Because yes, I have seen same parcel numbers bounce around, and it'd be one parcel number of ownership.
I'm not sure that this falls under this verbiage here at the moment. I can do a little more research.
No, I mean, I'm good with the wording and everywhere other than that one example.
And to speak to Mr. Markovich's issue with, once it's recorded, you can't unrecord it. That could be something that's done before it's recorded. So at that point, they'd say, well, we will put this on here, and at that point, we can do variance, because that's where we go for that issue. But it would have to be before it's recorded. I'm fairly sure we can't unrecord.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Okay, now we need a motion to approve this as amended by the last two motions.
I'll make a motion that we move this as amended for council.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Okay, if not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Now, we're gonna move to item 8, discussion on clarification of certain code sections bearing on land use and development as contained in chapter 26, 32, and 38 of the Oconee County Code of Ordinances. Mr. Markovich, you had public comment on that?
Thank you. I guess, again, I understand where the planning department's going in terms of trying to come up with some minor subdivisions. That's perfectly understandable. But when it comes to access to a road, I don't care if it says should or shall. I just think that if you've got lots that are fronting on a state road, of what we call it's a secondary state highway, what we call a farm to market road, and those lots, and you create a subdivision that is spread out across that, why they can't have direct access, I don't know why we want to tell somebody that they should have to do this, as opposed to saying shall. I just think the whole thing is absurd. State law is very clear. It makes it, it says that those property owners have the right to come to the state, and the state will actually put their driveway in. They put in the pipe, they do the whole thing. And so I just think that this access part, the whole thing needs to be struck.
Thank you, sir. All right, we'll open this up for discussion.
So last meeting, there was some conversation about private roads and private road standards and why we have them. We invited Kyle Reed here, who's Director of Roads and Bridges, to come speak to that matter. So You all had some questions about the genesis of our private road standards and why they exist. So Mr. Reed's here to speak to that.
And that's exactly right. I'm here to answer questions, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm a little under the weather. Not to defend the code or anything else like that. The ordinance stands on its own merits. Just to answer whatever questions you may have as far as what scenarios we may run into, the functional side of this. I hear a lot of the other end of this world as far as when something's been built and people wanting help, essentially, for something that's been already put on the ground. I can certainly speak to the code if y'all have any questions regarding that. Just whatever questions y'all may have on that end.
With regard to driveways, drives, private roads,
Yes.
et cetera, you're within a department that would deal with county, I'm assuming. Is county the same as state with regard to access to a road? Or what those roads are defined as?
No, it's county, and for me, if you build a driveway that you want to be a county road, it's a county road. It makes no difference on my end. If it's going to be a public road, then it has to be built to the public standards, whether it serves one house or 50.
But if you don't intend for the county to maintain it, and you're gonna maintain it yourself, whether there's one house or 50 on it, then does it still have to be built to those same standards?
It has to be built to the private driveway or road standard, drive or road standards.
And so is there a difference in if it is sufficient, I mean, if it's only going to one house versus going to, is there
Yeah,
limits?
There, 4 or 3 residences and under is a driveway, and there is no requirement. 4 to 10, there are requirements as far as, and there's different requirements, but the main requirements being that it's 20-foot wide gravel or wearable surface and a 50-foot right-of-way. And then the private road standards mirror the public road standards in design and construction.
And that's for 10 and above?
That's for, yes, 11 and above, 10, 11 and unders.
And is there a reason that you have different requirements for the 4 to 10 versus under 3? Is there a safety issue? Is there EMS issue? What is the reason for that?
And I'm sorry, I can't speak to the genesis of the ordinance. The gentleman that worked on this is no longer here, but as far as my understanding, yes, that was the thought behind why they did what they did as far as how many houses were served and moving up in the standard compared to how many houses were being served.
Was as far as safety? You're
Yes,
saying, like,
as far as
so
access to those properties by emergency vehicles. And then Mr. King was gonna be here today, but he couldn't make it to speak on that specifically.
Does Roads and Bridges work with the building department? At what point, where does a red flag go up if you have 3 people servicing on a driveway and one of those 3 people who has a 40-acre plat decides to section off 10 acres and now there's a 4th property on that same driveway? At what point does this, I mean, you get involved, I'm assuming, when somebody says, I want to build a driveway back to my property.
I'm sorry, sir. We don't get involved unless it's gonna be a public road. We have no involvement. That it would be entirely fall on building codes planning.
So if it's a private road,
Yes.
driveway, or private road, you all don't have any involvement in it?
The only involvement that I would have in is if it's coming off a county road and ensuring that the access is adequate for what they're building. If it's a private road, it's over 11 lots, and there's other parts of the ordinance that get triggered by that as far as development standards for roads and upgrading of roads. But as far as if somebody just comes in and says, you know, we've got this 40-acre subdivision off the back and it's going off a state road or a private road, then no, sir. If it's private, then I do not have a say in that. unless it's coming off a county road.
Okay, so for an example, if I have my driveway and there's 3 houses on my driveway.
Yes.
We split off part of the property and we're gonna put a 4th house on my driveway. Do I have to come to you and say, okay, now there's a 4th house going on there, and you tell me that we gotta upgrade it, or because it's already a private road, nothing has to be done?
So, to answer your question, where does the genesis, where do we hear about it becoming from 3 to 4? Usually 911 addressing gives us a heads up, like, hey, I'm about to issue the 4th address. As far as the same thing, if you were to supply me with a site plan that shows you split off an acre for whoever, and yes, then at that point I'd say I need a plan for your private drive. So that already exists in the code.
And you don't find out about it until 911 addressing has been?
Generally, that's when it usually that's when it comes to me. That's the most obvious example. Sometimes people just walk in with it and be like, hey, here's my 3 houses or things of that nature. Usually they're going the other way to go address the property.
And 911 addressing doesn't get triggered until you get a build permit. They don't issue 911 addresses for just land anymore.
For splitting up the properties, though, I'll see that directly.
Not necessarily. Are you saying you will?
If it's over 5 acres, I won't see it if it doesn't meet the other family subdivision tracts, things of that nature. But generally
Because
speaking,
911 doesn't get involved just because it's a piece of dirt. So in other words, somebody could have invested money in a build permit and put their 5% down with a contractor, and then we stop them because you're the 4th house after a huge investment has been made.
oftentimes, majority of times, just for whatever in the recent past has been, most of those have been mobile home transfers, just in the last 1 to 2 months. That's kind of where those have popped up. And that's not saying that's not stick-built homes. That's just another, talking about the cost of doing business, people, moving mobile homes, that's a whole other cost regarding roads.
So roads and bridges, let's go back to another roads and bridges question then. I know with the state, when you want to access for a driveway, the state is not going to prohibit you from doing that because they're not going to prohibit you from having access, if I'm correct. They will actually pay for it if you put that permit it and put it where they want you to put it. The state is also, depending on the size of road, looking at what the speed limit is on that road, what the view lane is on that road, at 3 feet high, and a whole lot of formula. Does the county do the same thing?
Yes, we follow the old ARMS manual, which I believe was 96, but yes, we do, and it's in the ordinance in 26.3E, saying how we calculate site distance, and 10 feet per mile per hour. So if it's a 25 mile per hour road, it's 250 feet to keep it simpler than the way it is now for the DOT, which I'm not saying anything against. It's just simpler.
Right.
Yeah, it's more readily, easily for people to understand.
And that is if somebody is getting a road onto a county road.
Or driveway. We look at any access to a county road we look at. We buy it through an encroachment permit.
Okay.
So if I've got a 5-acre tract of land, it's already been divided, I buy all 5 lots, and I decide that I'm gonna put a house on each acre for my kids, I've gotta have a 20-foot driveway and 50-foot of right-of-way, and I already own all the land to start with. Why do I have to have a 50-foot right-of-way to start with? But why do I have to meet county standards? This is all my land. And those are all my family on that 5 acres. So why do I need Kyle to come in and say, hey, bud, you gotta make this thing 20 foot wide?
Kyle won't. The only thing.
No, I'm just saying, but the county come in and say, this has gotta be 20 foot wide, you gotta have a 50-foot right of way, but I own all the land. Yes, it's going on to a county road, but it's all my land to start with, so.
You just gotta put in a second driveway.
Well, and the people the road that you're pulling onto is county land, and people that aren't on that property drive on it. So, I think what I'm hearing is that at some point there is a level of hazard and maintenance or whatever upkeep
Yeah, to a
in order to
point on
get to
that.
people back in
The,
a one.
to a larger degree, what I've seen, and again, if I can speak personally, and it has nothing to do with the ordinance, but if I can speak personally, as generations go on, people pass away, property gets transferred, those kind of things, and then access is gone. If you don't have the access there for 20 years, then the property all the way in the back may not have access anymore. And sometimes families are bad to have difficulties when the matriarch, patriarch passes away. And then you can block access because you didn't have one. You didn't have right of way. All you had was just a promise and a.
Does something within your maintenance protect that? Because that sounds like a landlock issue.
It is, but no. Just like maintenance on a private road. There's a private driveway or a private drive. There is no requirement of maintenance, and those are the calls I get whenever something's not maintained.
Talk
I was
about-
gonna ask that
yeah,
question.
talk
All right,
about
just,
that a moment.
just recently, right off of Pine Grove Road, I believe y'all put in a access driveway right beside Mr. Cyrus's home to some acreage right there on the right.
Talking about Snow Creek Forest.
I have no idea what's going there. I just know that you come down the road, you pass the little farm, then there's a big open field before you get to Gruber Shires' house.
Oh, Pine Grove, I'm
Okay,
sorry, no,
yeah.
I'm thinking of something different, I'm
And
sorry.
there's a pretty steep access there. I assume y'all put it in because it's the first driveway I've ever seen in 40 years. But let's say that, okay, whoever bought that is now, they are the patriarch of the family, and he puts a house there. That's a great driveway for him. But then his kids decide they love the peace and quiet, what's left of it out there, and they want to build on there too.
Yes.
And so the next thing you know, you've got 2 houses, one driveway's fine. You got 3 houses, one driveway's fine. The 4th house and the driveway begins to wear and it's not maintained and you get ditches. Do you in fact get that call?
Yeah, depending
Especially
on
when
what
the
the
family
access
can't get along
is.
and get it done.
Depending on what the access is, yes. I mean, sometimes we do get those calls whenever the road gets beat out or the ditches get filled in and it gets washed across. And
It becomes a safety issue.
I've
for
seen
everybody.
subdivisions on the lakes that they have no covenants, no restrictions. They own individually to the center line of the road. And everyone maintains a paved road, which is not paved really anymore, but everybody maintains that paved road right in front of their house. Well, some people are happy to maintain it. Some people are happy to make it what it could be, what they want it to be. And then others are not happy at all to maintain it, and they live at the very beginning of the road. And there is nothing that keeps them from not maintaining their section of the road with potholes, large potholes, those kind of things in the road.
And I'm assuming
Worst
that
case
you
scenarios,
all,
these are worst case scenarios.
that
so
you
I'm
all
not
say
saying-
these are hands-off, that it's a private road, it's not our department.
To a point. There is a rudimentary road program, but it has to be 11 houses or more. It has to meet the standards to become a private road, which is a rudimentary road, which we go in and we gravel and shape up with the alignment as it is, just to be able to get emergency vehicles in and out.
I kind of gathered that our small subdivision is sort of a project to try to get something going that maintains something at a smaller scale, right?
Correct. So the 10 or fewer still triggers the private drive standards, which is 50-foot right-of-way, 20-foot driving surface, gravel, a number of other items. The idea is that those standards still exist. So, Mrs. Lyles, your 3 houses becoming 4, grandkids, friends, whoever coming out there, all of a sudden you have 5 or 6 houses out there. At 3, you'd have to turn to a private drive. At 10 to 11, you'd have to turn to a private road, even if it's a family compound or commune or things of that nature. A lot of people to get around the road issue, the paying for roads, Mr. Johnson's financially aware of how much a road costs as of recently from having to buy your own private drive. You spend a lot of money putting a perfect drive in. People just access all the way down the roadway, just off the frontages. So they don't have to build their own roads or drives. The issue is that if we were to continue at our current rate of growth and everyone gets their own driveway, we already have dangerous enough roadways. Creating more crossings and more, side impacts is probably not the wisest way to go about it. So that's just my whole push here, is that we have very deadly roads per mile. I did include that in the backup material I emailed y'all, the study we did last year. So that's kind of the push for it, is that if we could possibly have some form of kind of road or access standards, and if you only, even if only on the major arterials, like 123 or 11 or things of that nature. And while the state does have its rules, the state did tell us when our very first meeting with council last year, it's getting close to a year now, that if we set the rules, they'll carry them for us. We haven't tried that yet, but.
And I can speak personally from experience on a rural road. You think, well, drunk driving is ranked as our highest killer, but for example, Neil was almost killed by a lady who was distracted driving. He pulled out of a driveway and was going down the road, every light on, every slow-moving vehicle notification tag up, everything we could possibly have to let her know that we were a slow-moving vehicle, and she still slammed into the rear of him. But it went down as a distracted driving accident. So, but that is a case where she might not have hit me, probably couldn't have caught me coming around that curve, because I drive faster than normal, but it was a slow-moving vehicle, and so when you add more and more and more driveways on a place like, in a situation like that, the young man that was killed down in Anderson by a drunk driver, he was in a tractor, and she knocked it completely over. She hit it so hard, but it went down as a drunk driving accident. So, that's not really a drunk drive. I mean, it is, but it's not. It was a slow-moving vehicle as well. So, I think we need to look very hard at the safety of roads, whatever the cause is, and whatever can help us prevent those kind of things.
I don't disagree that the safety of roads is an issue, and I think it's an issue that, I don't know if it's the planning department should be covering it or not, but I think your point is interesting, but where he got hit was on the bigger road. When we're actually talking about the driveway that he drove down before he got to the bigger road, and that's the part I'm wanting to leave alone.
No, we're talking about multiple driveways onto a major road, right? I mean, in other words, what we're trying to do is say, we don't want to develop, we don't want someone who has property like ours to subdivide it and put, because you could easily fit 5 driveways between where he pulled out of and where he pulled into by road standards.
But once that car's sitting on that road, it doesn't matter whether there were 5 driveways that got that car to that road or whether there was 1 driveway that got that car to that road. We're actually dealing with that road now. And what this subject is the access to get to the road.
Right. And what I'm saying is the more access points you have, the more likely you are to have someone hit someone. If there is someone slowing, they're slowing down, they're turning, they may swing wide. It's the number of driveways accessing that road. If we can slow that down, if we can lessen that, I think it makes for a safer road.
But what this ordinance is talking about is saying, okay, instead of 5 driveways, we're going to put you on 1 driveway, but we're going to make you upgrade that 1 driveway. And what my contention has been is you're putting a hardship on a lot of potential families and farms by making everybody go to that 1 road and then making them upgrade that road to boot. Even though it doesn't have anything to do with the county, it's a private road on somebody's land.
So what that's gonna drive is when your 3rd kid wants to put the 4th house there, you're gonna put a 2nd driveway in.
And then he's gonna put the 2nd driveway in, right. Nope, that's absolutely right.
Instead of spending $50,000 on engineering to put the 4th.
To be upstandard the driveway that's there. So I think we're going backwards.
I can understand that, I guess. It
I
just.
don't think it's gonna accomplish what you're wanting it to accomplish. I think there's too many ways around it.
To
Just
upgrade
like
it.
there's ways around. That's what we're trying to do, is stop the loopholes of creating subdivisions a little at a time. There's gonna be loopholes everywhere. We can't regulate
That's fair.
for the person that is not gonna obey the law. That's what, we won't even go there. I'll hush. but you can't make law just to stop somebody that isn't gonna obey the law anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm a big proponent of helping staff accomplish their job better. And I don't think that we should just sweep this under the rug, but I don't think that we're going about it the right way. I think we're getting too detailed on it. And we're gonna hurt too many more people than we're trying to fix here. I mean, we've got a rogue developer. Make a policy about rogue developers. Call them out by name and say, this is their name policy, and we have a rule because of you. But,
I could do that.
but I think that yeah.
Would
I've
you like
already
for me to
said my
go
point.
look and see what, like for the mobile homes and RVs, you all said go look at other ordinances, bring us snippets back. I can probably do the same thing with the minor subdivisions, depending on what it's like. Would you like to go about it that way?
Yes.
Say that again.
So for the RV parks and mobile homes, last one, you asked me to kind of bring you back other counties, what they did. I can certainly do the same thing with minor subdivisions, bring you snippets back of, or portions of other people's codes back for you all to kind of chew on.
I just think we need to leave minor subdivisions alone because we had a reason for creating subdivisions as 10. It's because this is the majority a rural county. And I think we're just messing with too much by trying to micromanage these divisions of land. I don't call me selling my child 5 acres me becoming a developer or me giving my child 5 acres. Yes, I know I'm technically subdividing my property, but I'm not a developer. Just because I'm taking 5 acres and giving it to my child.
So, yes, the majority of the county is rural. I mean, I just got another minor subdivision today. I'd say the majority of the subdivisions we get aren't the 200 lot subdivision areas, and the builders, developers probably speak to the limited amount of land that's occurring, but the majority are minor subdivisions that we get, and they're around the lake. I'd say we got 8 this year so far, the minor subdivisions.
You're saying between 3 and 9?
Yeah, 3 and 10, yes, 11
Okay.
being the cutoff.
If they're around the lake, does the lake overlay not?
That speaks to density. That speaks to the density of how many you're allowed. But they still have to go through the roads. Now, they're selling to a high-end market, so they're putting in the private roads and things of that nature. They're not farm transfers and things of that nature, what you all are mainly concerned about.
But see, they're already doing what we're trying to, I don't understand why we're trying to stop something that they're already doing anyway. I mean, you said they're already putting in the.
Right, many are, but the further away you get, and the more and more we get developed, I mean, we're just growing and growing and growing. So if we don't want to look at subdivision standards, I guess the other issue is that, while of course I'll be here for the next 25 years and I'll do everything the correct way, the next person in my chair may be slightly different or differently aimed. If there isn't a set of standards to kind of look at, that could change. So that's just something else to think about.
One more thing, I really appreciated the information that you sent as far as collisions and fatal collisions and wrecks and things like that was in the packet. In looking at it, really what it comes down to is we've got a private road that accesses either a county or a state road. And that access point, whether we've got one farmhouse or whether we've got an apartment building with 100 residents, it's really coming out into that intersection and feeding out that seems to be where we could potentially have issues or help the county out. But as I look at this collision map, 90% of it seems to either be on Highway 11 or Highway 123, or in a city. And when you look at the hot zone area, it's all within the cities. And none of what we're doing here really changes that, at least not at this point in time in history.
So 123 and 11, so those are the arterials that I was mentioning, that if we were going to do anything with access on, we should look at focusing on those. But if not, we don't necessarily have to do anything with access. And Mrs. Lyle's right, we initially started this issue out to deal with the road developers, the road developer standard ordinances. So maybe I'll go back to that and leave access alone and see what we can come back up with.
I say we address the actual problem instead of trying to create a bigger problem.
Okay, let's start looking at the RV park manufactured homes first, then we'll go to the RV park. Adam?
So as requested, I looked up a few other counties. This case, it's Greenville, Hart, and Anderson County for manufactured home parks. And I gave you a list of parameters last week, and you all said go forth and find some information regarding them, and I did. So there's a variety of different ways people define what RV parks are, and other parameters in which they're built. So these are what other counties currently do. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle, for
Thank you, sir.
coming in and helping us out. Thank you very much. So what do you want from us on this particular subject?
So we can look and see what you all like. Is there anything that stands out to you that you hate? Something that if I were to show up to you with something in a draft form that you would throw at me, or something that you were like, oh, this is where it's at. This could help with any number of things in the county, or it could, I'm not looking to.
Are we having a problem with mobile home parks now?
We're having issues with some abandoned structures that are probably called mobile home parks, yes, but in general, no, we're not having any issues with mobile home parks, but we are having more mobile home parks being installed.
Do we not have any ordinances that will take care of these abandoned mobile homes or trailers, whatever they are? Do we not have an ordinance that can take care of that and get those taken out, done away with?
So that's one portion of it, of course, but trying to clean up what people done in the past is different from managing what they do going forward. So this is kind of looking at that issue as far as managing mobile home parks and seeing how the county is developed. This is our really last affordable housing option, I think, personally, is mobile homes. I think they're put out there, and they shouldn't be you can cram them in there pretty tight if you have the ability to put septic tanks around them.
What was how close can you put them together?
I believe I want to say fire code says 10 feet, if I'm not mistaken. But of course, that's not counting septic tanks. That's just strictly from building codes perspective. I believe it's 10 feet. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 10 feet.
Yeah, no, I had totally forgotten about the thing there where it talks about you can make a variance for relationships by blood or marriage. You could also do that on our small subdivision in some way. That would help.
Family transfers.
Family transfers would be.
I would never see that. To briefly step backwards for a moment to clarify what Ms. McPhail is saying, is that if you transfer your acre to your son or whomever, I won't see that until you go to build on it.
You don't fall into that driveway upgrade as long as it stays within the family.
But once I see it, once it becomes a building codes issue, then I will see it if it's.
So if I transfer that and then he gets ready to build a house, then you'll see it, right?
I'll see it at that point, but the land itself won't.
But what I'm saying is here on this one in Hart County, Georgia, the rules do not apply if the home is being put in as a familial tie.
All right, so Ms. McPhail is talking about number one, under Hart County there. I kind of put the little gray or the yellow. Is it yellow or is it red color? Is it? Language there is that we could utilize some nature, something of that nature for saying, hey, if this is going in for your kid, we're not selling. I'm not a developer. I'm just putting something in for my family or my workers, for that matter. If you have to do, I don't know how you all do itinerant farm workers.
There's a lot of mobile homes on farms.
Right, and so maybe we could find some way to, if we do look at mobile home standards, that we could say, all right, well, if you're doing this for your itinerant workers, is that the right terminology? All right, just a second. Then, these standards wouldn't apply because they're temporary in nature, something of that effect, if that's what you're looking at.
So going back to this specifically with regard to manufactured homes and not trying to apply it back on the other stuff yet, the state does have a definition of mobile home park.
Okay.
Do they also have which really talks about lease? When you're looking at section 27-47-210, it does define at the state level what a mobile home park is. I can't tell, and I haven't done any more research to find out if it does talk about density or requirements or anything like that at a state law level. Have we looked at that?
I haven't looked at that. I'm guessing they would probably leave that up to individual counties for land use, just
Okay.
kind of judging by what the rest of the state does with a lot of other stuff. So, but it's possible. I'll look into it, certainly. But the 3 other counties that are relatively near us have a variety of standards here. Greenville has 3 or more. So if you have 3 or more, it's mobile home park, not acreage wise.
Are we using the term manufactured home and mobile home interchangeable?
Manufactured home, there's a definitional difference of manufactured home and mobile home. I think it has to do with the year built. So I'm putting them in there.
Tom, help me out. I'm having a brain aneurysm here. Manufactured home, am I thinking of where you pour the foundation and out comes the package and you put it on a foundation? If I can
I think that was a modular.
ask the chair, recognize Tom.
Go ahead, Tom.
You have modular homes.
That's what it
Modular
is.
homes are built under the main code, okay? The difference between a mobile home or what we call a manufactured home, they come under the HUD code. It's an entirely different code, okay? They're not regulated by, they're really regulated by HUD. And so, and just as a word of warning, be very cautious when you start zoning mobile homes because you can get in pretty deep, pretty quick. Ask Georgetown County. They're involved in a lawsuit.
Does that have to do with HUD, that there's issues with lawsuits and?
You have to be very careful when you're creating mechanisms for mobile homes because they tend to look at it as a class, okay? And so, and because it tends to be that entry level for some people in getting into housing, and because it can be looked at as a class, that's why you gotta be kind of careful there. I have actually seen lawsuits in Texas and some other places where they tried to, I'm not saying, I mean, clearly South Carolina allows, the Comprehensive Planning Act allows for, being able to regulate mobile homes. I'm just saying you have to just tread very carefully because they can be seen as a separate class.
So like if you were to say you could only have 1 mobile home per acre, perhaps that would trigger some people just suing us just out of that thing, because we're trying to say we're going to use our zoning powers to stop it because it's an unwanted land use. And quite the opposite is my intent of bringing this up, is to say this is a land use we have and it's a necessary land use. It's affordable. It's our affordable housing. I'll keep saying it over and over again. That this is what we have to house a lot of people in. So either we can let developers choose to develop how they want to, whether in a good way or in a shadier way or in a kind of a rogue developer way to kind of put this in a context that we're used to hearing. Or we can say, be proactive and say, okay, well, if you're going to put together X number of mobile homes, then this is how it should be done because we know that this is the entry level housing for most people and it shouldn't be, if it's the last resort for someone, it should be at least livable and not something negative. It shouldn't be something to be negatively looked upon.
Yeah, and just in reading through this, for me, I looked at it as, okay, obviously there are some limitations. You don't want to put 25 to an acre. I think that'd be a bit overcrowded. I can't imagine what 10 feet apart is on an acre, but I would think that'd be a bit crowded. But I did like the fact that some of them had more restrictive versus less restrictive, and my thing was, every time we should lean towards the least restrictive. So the more you can put on the property and still have it a viable, enjoyable place to live, the better off you would be. The one for Greenville is very open. They don't give you a size. They just say a parcel that houses more than 3 mobile homes. That's pretty open. You can put 3 on an acre. You can put 3 on a half an acre, as long as it meets whatever your minimum code is. And then you go from there. So you start with a fairly flexible definition. And then each of these, to me, I could almost say, go through here and pick the least restrictive of each of the county's uses and come back to us perhaps with unless it's none. and come back to us perhaps with something that we could work on amending to suit. Does that work? Instead, I mean, it's hard for me to sit here and try, oh, well, wait a minute, county said. But if you went through and came back with the ones that would be the least restrictive with the most care taken that it would be a pleasant place, a safe place to live. And create something that we then could amend as an ordinance for a mobile home park. Does that make sense?
It does.
Perfect sense. I mean, it's amazing how the brevity of this, where we tend to, you know, if we did it, it'd be all of this.
Oh, yeah.
And they do, you know, they've done it in 2 or 3 pages, so
Yeah.
why, you know, if we're gonna do something, it seems to me brevity is the, way we should go. And we just
Yeah, because
need-
it
we
says
just
you
need
can
to,
lease it
you
or
know,
not lease it.
manufactured a fancy way of saying mobile home, and we just need to watch our definitions or watch our words.
Sure.
Because modular was what I was looking for, so.
All
I
that,
just don't think we need to put so many restrictions on them
Yeah.
that it drives the cost of renting these things out the roof, because then we're defeating the purpose of getting affordable housing in this county.
Correct. 100%.
all that being said, the state defines manufactured home park, which is kind of what we're talking about here, as being spaces offered for rent or lease. It doesn't talk about anything about sale when it's talking about a park. In a park, now we're talking about a neighborhood. And a neighborhood should fall under whatever zoning we have as far as the space needed for a home. When we then turn and say, well, here's the space needed for a home in this zoning, but oh wait, you have a mobile home, yours is gonna be different, that's where Mr. Markovich's class thing comes in, I think.
Well, there's a mobile home park down where we live, and they sold each lot. But it's still far, I believe it's more dense, but it was control-free, so that should be, it should be left so that as much of that could be done as possible to make it as affordable
Well,
as
and it's a
possible.
community as opposed to a park, maybe.
We used to have a ton of mobile home parks here, and there used to be way more mobile homes. It is not an affordable option for starting out to go buy a mobile home, brand new now, and put it on the lot. I lived in a mobile home when I got married. We owned the mobile home, we didn't own the lot. We rented a lot. We could move it, when we bought our land. But we just don't need to price these people out of renting somewhere or owning somewhere. There's different types of mobile home parks. There's ones that lease only the land. You bring your mobile home and sit on it. And then there's ones that they have mobile homes set up. You can rent their mobile homes, or you can lease to buy the land and the home. We got all kinds of different options here.
So what I was kind of thinking is anything when you're subdividing the land off, that falls on our subdivision regulations. We're not looking at whether you stick built or you roll it on there. Just looking at, that's a subdivision regulation. So if somebody cuts off 10 parcels, I'm not looking to see, their building plans. And so their setbacks and everything else, density, depending on where it is, that would all fall under our current zoning code, and we're not looking to classify it differently. The odds are, most of these are gonna go into control-free district. That's just playing the odds on it. The parks would be a tract of land with multiple homes on one piece of property, generally owned by the same person, the land, and managed thereof for rent or for lease, as you noted. So this is the direction of that. Anything subdividing of the land, that means chunking it off, would follow our subdivision regs.
So in other words, and that's where you could, if it's, because they say whether or not charge is made for such accommodation, that would take care of the person who wanted to put in a group of houses, say for workers. And then that, they're not charging them because perhaps that is a benefit of their job.
Correct.
Like I said, I think if we could go back at this point to come back with something that is the least restrictive, but most conducive to pleasant affordability. I'm like you, growing up here, well, I didn't grow up here, but spending enough time here, there were places here that were, some of them, it was a dangerous place to be. But some of them are very well maintained and very
Correct.
nice, and I would say affordable. Not the great big ones with the humongous homes, but where somebody has moved up, they've sold their mobile home, and someone has purchased it, put it here. It's a less expensive, maybe an older mobile home within the law, and that we need to allow for all of that kind of stuff to be done so that people can come in, find a place to live, work here to get started and be saving for their property. But on the other hand, we need to make sure that there are some restrictions so that the landlord can't abuse them.
Gotcha. If I were to try to bring in a mobile home park developer in this county, would that be somewhat helpful? I've already talked to a couple about when we started going down this path, what their general feelings of it as or people who sell mobile homes as a whole, see if this would affect them versus me just taking it from other counties.
I don't think in our county, somebody that sells new mobile homes is really gonna help us, because I don't think we really have that many that can afford to go buy a whole bunch of new mobile homes and
It's
rent
fair.
them out. We have a lot that bring in older mobile homes
Mm-hmm.
and rent them out.
Is there somebody like that? That you know?
The person I spoke to sells both new and used. And I believe I want to say 1978 is the oldest model you can bring into the county. That's pretty old still, but I think that's the oldest model you can bring into the county. Fairly sure that's it. Yeah, 78, yeah. But if you all think that would be helpful, I mean, I'm going to go talk to these people anyways, just as a matter of doing the research. But if you'd like for me to invite them to come, answer any questions you have or comment.
We're down to one in the county now, right, Mr. Wright?
That's who I'm speaking of. I don't know. Perhaps there's other people who sell
That's the
them.
only one we got.
See, literally, we used to have multiple places that sold new mobile homes.
we're
So,
down to one.
it has went down tremendously, just, in
Well,
my-
I mean, hey, the mobile
30
homes that are
years.
in the one I was talking about,
Probably.
every single one of them cost more than our house did.
Yeah.
So, mobile home park is totally new definition, but I don't think we need to worry about a part like that. I think we need to worry about the part where someone has invested in a piece of property, they want to bring in maybe 15 or 20 mobile home units, park them, in a row under a shade tree, and rent them out to, whether it's college students or newly marrieds or newly employees moving into the county, haven't found a place yet, but they've got a job, they're looking for something temporary. And that's why, if maybe they're not looking for something temporary, maybe they know that they're gonna stay there. All that we need to do is make sure that it's to the point that the county can step in if it becomes an unsafe environment for the renters.
A perfect example of what I think Adam's getting at is the one right down here in front of James M. Brown School. Those are, some of those trailers in there I think are in the late 60s, early 70s. They're kept up, but when those trailers, that's what I would consider a trailer park, because it's, and like the ones they have in Clemson, they have these things seem like 2 feet apart in places. Those are the types we need to regulate, not the ones like down on 24 where there's several homes there and they've cut them off and you got an acre of land or a half acre or whatever.
But he said that falls under a subdivision, so that's not, when you're selling it, that's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about something that is either rent, lease, or no charge, right?
That's correct. This wouldn't be the subdivision of the individual parcels. Those would fall under our
So that's
subdivision
what we're
regulations.
talking about, that older one.
And they even had one next to the fire station here in Walhalla. They were sort of down, now I think they're fixing to put another one there. It got covered up in kudzu one time. Those are the type, I think, that we need to have some kind of regulation on to where they don't get to the point to where it's unsafe to even be in these places. And they do get that way.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And we need to, that will protect the guy that's just moving in or coming in, maybe working in a plant that don't have anything, and then he can work toward buying maybe one of the lots with a mobile home on it. But he's got to start somewhere, but he don't need to be he'd be better off living under a bridge than in some of these places I've seen around.
Yeah, I think having somebody speak to us and then have like I said, if you could put together
Least
something
restrictive.
that is as flexible as possible with something better than none. So
Gotcha.
that we do, it doesn't become overgrown with kudzu and that sort
But
of stuff.
what I hear everybody saying, and we got to wind this up, but, nowhere in any of these pages to talk about maintenance and safety, and that's what we're, talking about.
Right.
So, I mean, that falls under our, you know,
International Property Maintenance
nuisance
Code.
and whatever in the community. So we're kind of talking about two different things. I mean, if we want to set some standards and density standards or whatever, that's one thing. But what we're really talking about is safety and sightliness and nuisance, in my opinion. Indirectly, what we're talking
So there
about.
are safety standards? I mean, those kind of things can't, I mean,
We
there
have-
is oversight for that sort of stuff. But again, it has to be enforced, right?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, that's, yeah.
We do have enforcement mechanism in place. Again, I always go back to the fact that it requires a lot of manpower and also cost when you get into the notion of demolishing structures, removing structures and such, but we do have code powers, code prescribed powers to take care of nuisance properties, things of that nature.
So what is your point for bringing this to us? What are you trying to accomplish?
Growth management. We are, just like everything else we do, is we have to look, it's not what's going on today, it's what's happening, and we're growing, and if we continue to grow at our current rate, we're gonna need more mobile homes, because or manufactured homes, because we're just keep growing, and, you know, a lot of people are priced out, and we should have a standard for, it's growth management is really what it is.
So what do y'all want him to do?
Like I said, I still would appreciate having a sample ordinance that is as open as possible. Like, for example, the first one from Greenville County, that is the least restrictive. Then flip to the next one, not none. But obviously some kind of something, and that would be, you're gonna talk to him. I don't know that he needs to talk to us, but I think if you talk to him and he says, well, you know, if you have, X amount between each one, an ambulance can access it, a fire truck can access it, you know, we can get in there and pull out the HVAC system and work on it, whatever, he could give you those things. I think open space requirement might be something where you limit it to if they are single families / whatever versus families. Obviously, you want some open space for families, but I don't know. I'm like, whatever. Just come back to us with an ordinance that doesn't have 3 choices for every single section.
Okay,
So that we can amend it based on what we know is advisable.
will do.
I think you do
Okay.
a good job on that.
I
Get
can do
that
that.
for us, if
Is that
you will.
okay with everyone?
All right.
I do like the homework that you've done on this.
I do too. I mean, it's great, yeah. Just gets a little confusing sometimes.
And to save a little time, let's do the RV part the same. Come back with something that you think is workable, and we can go from that point on to tweak it. And we need some examples of RV parks that are actually working in this area. I know we have several. And I also would like to know what the state, their law, or whatever you wanna call it, that says how long you can live or reside in a camper.
It's 180. It's a HUD and FEMA. It's 180 days, 180 days.
And the county has no standard, right?
The county doesn't. I did say several months ago that the county had standards in building codes. It wasn't building codes. It's FEMA and HUD and the RV Association.
Because we have actual
But-
RV parks in
In the county, yes.
in some of these, Foxwood Hills, we actually have one
At least one, yes, sir.
that I know of. I know of one, and they're living there year round, not just 180 days. The state's not enforcing it, so
I'm not looking to enforce it, to
we
be
don't
quite
need to be
honest.
worried about that either, so.
I would have to be able to prove it. And so each of you could take a shift, actually. We do like 6-hour shifts
Yeah.
rotating.
Well, and I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I wouldn't enforce it unless I was forced to enforce it, because some of the places that they're currently living in RVs are nicer than the mobile homes that they had before.
There's people that's living in RVs that cost way more than my house.
Well, yeah.
No, 100%.
You know, so that is,
They can live in it all they want.
when you talk about affordable housing, I really truly believe that as long as it's maintained and healthy,
That's all we use
Perhaps.
when it's up.
Maintained and healthy.
It's built on a
So,
Peterbilt truck.
bring us back something, let us look at it, and we can go from that point
8
and
years
see what
old,
we can come up with.
$170,000,
Okay.
and probably
Do we
worth-
have any old business?
Go ahead.
Do we have any new business?
I just have a question. If, I watched the council meeting the other night,
Sure.
and there's a big issue with semi-structures being built on some property or something. Is there, and I've really felt for those people. Is there anything that our commission needs to do to help with that?
So if we wanted to look at primitive campground standards, that's what the property owner's definition of some of that setup is a primitive campground. And we don't have a primitive campground standard. Also, portions of that property are I would call it an RV park, although we don't have a definition for it, and that's not an enforceable term anyways, but there are multiple RVs that people are residing in, at least temporarily. So RV park standards could help abate that issue, or at least manage that issue. What they're doing with property, they can do. From a zoning issue, it's control-free district. We don't manage the usage of it as a density. We don't have any sort of density issues. But if we want to look at a primitive campground standards or RV parks, which we happen to be looking at, those could both be helpful towards some of those issues that were brought up during the council meeting.
Is there DHEC standards that come into play there in that situation?
DHEC has been out to that location multiple times. I think they've done, I believe they're doing what they can do. I really can't speak for the state, DHEC in particular, but I know we've gone out there and it's had a certain odor about it, so.
But as far as, with the amount of people there versus the amount of utilities that are there, is.
DHEC. I mean, I hate
So
to be
there's
the.
nothing that we can do to help them other than coming up with a campground thing?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, but regarding the septic system or their utility in that regard, well, there's nothing I can do for that. And I hate to be like the government knows, so go talk to that department. But DHEC is strictly in charge of septic tanks. As we went over earlier with minor subdivisions in the initial hearing language, anything regarding septic tank is strictly in DHEC's wheelhouse.
And they don't necessarily have to have a septic tank. They can actually still have outside potties, bathrooms.
So our privies are apparently,
That's it.
I wouldn't have believed it had I not had the standard from 1974 sitting on my desk right now, but you can have a outhouse, as it were.
Yep.
I don't believe they have an outhouse, but at this particular location we're talking about, but they are something that's possible. But yeah, primitive campground standards, if we're going to go forward with it, building codes is the next option as far as directly that particular location. But I can look at primitive campground standards if you like.
I mean, I don't want to go overboard just to fix this problem, but I was just concerned because this, I do believe, is in my range.
Sure.
I was going to see if there's anything that we can do to help them, but doesn't sound like it.
Write a strongly worded letter. Let me get back to you, honestly. Let me look at it and I'll get back to you before the next meeting if there's anything that planning commission can do.
It's probably one of those things that until something happens, nobody's gonna do anything. So oftentimes there's, like with the water that we had, 22 inches in 2 weeks, I would think that if it is as bad as I've heard, what little tiny bit I've heard, there might be actually a water contamination issue if it's close enough to a lake. But until something like that happens, nothing's gonna happen.
Right, as to that issue, yes. As to, I think a bulk of the issues that are raising the ire of the neighbors are criminal law issues that the sheriff's on and working on. And then there are some building code issues that community development and the building codes department has recently taken some enforcement action on. As to that particular entity, going more broad, then it would be a primitive campground ordinance, something like that.
But we have other departments that are working on it.
Yeah, well, the sheriff's office, it's Adam's department, but it's the other side of the hallway.
Okay.
With building codes and their efforts to enforce the codes that they have in place.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second, all those in favor?